Revenge with Karen.
My boss's laugh echoed louder than the coffee machine grinding away in the background, high-pitched, nasal, full of smugness, and it landed like a slap. "Enjoy your backlog," he said, tapping the stack of folders he'd just shoved my way like he was dealing out punishment in paper form. The whole team laughed, not fake chuckles, not polite office laughter. Actual wheezing from Kyle, who was still riding high after landing the $2 million Holloway account that should have gone to me. I just stared down at the folders like they might spontaneously combust and save me the dignity. The project? A mothballed Frankenstein of a client system named Stratacore, legacy code, abandoned compliance folders, documentation that read like it was printed on papyrus. The last time anyone even opened the dashboard, Obama was still in office. Every intern since 2017 had begged to avoid it like it was haunted. One guy claimed it corrupted his laptop. I figured that was an excuse. I'd soon learn he might have been generous. Anyway, if you've ever been handed a grenade with the pin already halfway out and told, "This'll be a great learning opportunity, congrats. We work the same kind of job." And hey, before I forget, since you're already knee-deep in this story, can I ask you something real quick? If you're one of the 95% who listen without subscribing, now's the perfect time to change that. It takes 2 seconds to hit that sub button and like the video, and it seriously motivates the team to keep dropping these bombshells every day. All right, back to the chaos. So after the meeting, Kyle's in his corner, throwing up peace signs on a Zoom call like he just cured cancer. I'm stuck in the file graveyard trying to resurrect whatever's left of Stratacore. I fire up the system. The UI looks like it was designed by someone who only knew how to use Excel and a dream. Half the buttons don't work. The login panel loops. I call IT, and the guy audibly groans when I tell him what system I'm trying to access. "You know we're sunsetting that next quarter, right?" he says. "Cool," I reply. "Just make a bonfire and roast marshmallows over it in the meantime." Day 1 with Stratacore, I find a folder labeled Do Not Touch 2008 Migration. Naturally, I touch it. What else was I gonna do, knit? Inside is a mess of client directories with cryptic labels like DS3421 and REAP flagged. I start to think maybe this isn't just a crap project. They wanted someone to take the fall if it blew up. Guess who just got elected tribute? Lunch rolls around. I microwave a burrito in the break room while Kyle's ordering sushi on the company card, courtesy of the Holloway deal. He winks as he walks by and says, "How's the digital archaeology going, Jones?" Like I'm Indiana freaking Jones searching for compliance artifacts instead of buried HR screw-ups. I go back to my desk, steam rising from the burrito and my ears. My hands are shaking, not from rage yet, but from the weight of realization. I'm not just sidelined, I'm expendable. You don't give real work to someone you plan to keep around. You give them work that lets you blame them later. Still, I'm no martyr, and I wasn't going to be their fall girl, so I lean in. I start clicking deeper into Stratacore's archive directories. Things begin to get weird. A vendor list shows recurring client payments from as recently as 3 months ago, and a contract supposedly inactive for 6 years. I try to cross-reference the payments in our CRM, but the client name, DS3421, doesn't even populate. It's not just inactive. It's hidden. Now I'm suspicious. Not curious, not confused, suspicious. Because no one hides active clients, not unless they've got something to hide about them. Kyle's voice from the other side of the room, "Remember, don't blow a fuse with that old thing. Just click next till you see a rainbow." He laughs again. I don't respond. I just smile tight, the way you do when you know something they don't, and I keep digging. By Thursday, I was 6 cups of coffee in and had developed a healthy hatred for whoever thought folder inside a folder named Final 2 use this one was a good system. Stratacore wasn't just old, it was rotting from the inside. Permissions were tangled, access logs were missing chunks, and half the files had been renamed with underscores, like someone tried to hide them during a fire drill. The deeper I went, the worse it got. Password-protected ZIP files with no notes. Files labeled temp backup v3 that were 500 MB each, and one lone Excel sheet named budget 2010 that somehow linked to an external server that hadn't been used since the Bush administration. This was no ordinary corpse. It was poking around in a digital mausoleum, and the bodies hadn't been embalmed. They were still leaking. Most of the documentation was like decoding a ransom note. No consistent formatting, random acronyms, timestamps that didn't match file creation dates. One user ID kept popping up in the old metadata, 134 km. I didn't have to guess. KM was Kyle's old handle before they updated naming conventions. Cute. I start searching for anything tagged with DS3421, the client code that kept surfacing like a bad penny. It showed up in 3 completely unrelated directories. One of them was tucked under a training materials folder for a different client. Another had been manually archived by someone with admin-level access, who, according to audit logs, hadn't worked here in 4 years. But the file had been updated last month. I pulled up the audit logs for DS3421 and just stared. Someone had edited records on this supposedly dormant client less than 27 days ago. And not just metadata updates, actual file deletions, overwrites, new entries logged under the admin profile. Now here's the kicker. The contract file tied to DS3421 wasn't even stored under the client's folder. It was buried in a random directory labeled Legal OLD Archive inside a folder titled Kyle B Cup. I open it. My jaw doesn't hit the floor, but it starts to hover. The document was a master service agreement. Date, August 2008. Status, active. That's not a typo. Active. Not expired, not pending termination, not even to review. It was still marked as binding. E-signature platform it was stored in had last pinged the contract as accessed a week before I got reassigned to Stratacore, which made no sense. This contract was older than most smartphones, yet someone was still peeking at it, and worse, acting on it. My first instinct was to flag it to legal, but I paused. Something felt wrong, like walking into your living room and seeing a stranger's cup on the table. You don't call the cops right away, you check the windows, locks, the air, you listen. That's what I did. I started listening to the way this system breathed. A new hunch hit me sideways. What if Stratacore wasn't the failure? What if it was the cover? That's when I opened a folder labeled SIS Retention Manual. It looked boring, and that's why I knew it had teeth. Inside was a set of scheduled script logs, files that tell the system when to clean up, when to purge old backups, when to maintain disk space. I scrolled through the entries and jumped out. DS3421 flagged for deletion 3 weeks ago. Deleted 2 days later. No retention flag, no warning alert, just gone. And yet here I was, looking at the contract, still active, requiring a 15-year minimum on all customer data. It wasn't supposed to be gone. It wasn't supposed to be touched. And someone had bulldozed right through it like a toddler with a crayon and a white wall. I slumped back in my chair. I hadn't even gotten halfway through the files, but already my skin was crawling. Not because I was in over my head, but because I wasn't. I knew exactly what this meant. Whoever had touched this data either didn't read the contract or read it and did it anyway. And if that second one was true, well, that made this more than an accident. That made it evidence. 2008 Master Service Agreement stared back at me like a ticking time bomb with a smiley face sticker slapped on it. No header changes. No amendments. Just 27 pages of clean, legally binding landmines, signed in blue ink, scanned into PDF, and completely ignored by everyone in charge. But not me. I read it twice, then a third time, as my screen dimmed and the office lights flickered into their late afternoon death glow. Nobody reads contracts like that anymore. Hell, most people skim them for buzzwords, liability, billing terms, SLA if they're feeling ambitious, and toss them back into the archive like confetti at a compliance parade. But page 13 stopped me cold. Clause 14.3b, Client Data Preservation and Destruction Protocol. Buried under legalese and comma splices, laid it out plain as day. The service provider shall retain and make accessible all client data for a minimum of 15 years from the date of contract initiation. Unauthorized deletion or failure to demonstrate continuous data availability shall constitute breach of indemnity and grounds for regulatory referral. 15 years. That contract went live in August 2008. It meant August 2023 was the earliest date anything could legally be removed. And the logs I pulled from the auto scripts showed Stratacore purged DS3421 data in September 2024. That's 13 months early, which wouldn't have been a big deal if the clause didn't use words like breach and regulatory referral and termination of indemnity coverage. That's not a slap on the wrist. That's a company ending paper cut, especially when we were gearing up for a valuation pitch to investors and bringing in external auditors to prove how buttoned up we were. I went back to the auto deletion logs. There it was again, DS3421, wiped from active memory by a script titled Quarterly Cleanup SH, manually triggered by a user with override access. No automatic timestamp, manual, which meant someone chose to run it. I pulled the admin logs. The access ID, masked, of course, but the script ran at 2:13 a.m. on a Sunday. No system patch, no incident to justify it, no justification at all really, except maybe one. I opened my inbox and searched for internal conversations about DS3421, nothing recent. I tried Slack, nothing public, but in an old ticket thread from 2 years ago, I found something weird. Kyle had submitted a Jira comment saying DS3421 should be cleaned out if we're ever audited. Just a CYA, nothing urgent. A chill spider crawled down my back. I clicked back to the contract, zoomed in on the line. Failure to demonstrate continuous data availability shall constitute breach. Not might, shall. My mouth was dry. My fingers weren't moving like they should. But my mind was running laps. This wasn't a gray area. This wasn't a matter of interpretation. This was a straight-up violation. A breach that voided our indemnity protections and potentially opened us up to regulatory fines. And the best part, nobody had noticed. Or if they had, they damn sure hadn't told legal. Or the board. And Kyle, sweet, golden boy Kyle, had practically written his own confession and timestamped it 2 years ago. The same Kyle who handed me this flaming dumpster of a project with a wink and a smug little, "Good luck, Laura. Hope you like digging." I didn't like it, but I was digging. And now, I wasn't just holding a smoking gun. I was holding the legal equivalent of a thermonuclear warhead, a silent one. Nobody knew I had it. Nobody knew I'd seen what I'd seen. And that, more than anything, made this my moment, so I took a breath, saved a copy of the MSA to an encrypted flash drive, backed up the logs to a secure cloud folder, then shut my laptop like it was a coffin lid. The old me would have marched into HR and asked what to do. But that Laura, she was gone. This Laura was going to wait. Because timing, as I was learning, wasn't just everything, it was the difference between a pink slip and a power move. It took me a full hour to find the panel, and when I did, it was like breaking into the attic of a condemned house. No branding, no navigation, just raw terminal code and drop-downs that hadn't been styled since the Bush years. Stratacor's forgotten admin console was still live on an internal IP address no one had documented, buried in the old infrastructure like a digital time capsule. And now I was standing in it, uninvited, unsupervised, and more awake than I'd been in months. The login credentials were a miracle, or maybe just negligence. They hadn't updated the default superadmin password since before the rebrand. All it took was a guess based on the old IT director's dog's name, thanks, office trivia night, and I was in. And then it all unraveled. The logs weren't stored like modern audit trails. These weren't JSON payloads or event trackers. These were line-by-line entries, hand-coded, time-stamped, and tagged with internal user handles, like watching the pages of a diary that someone really didn't want you to read. I searched by client ID, DS3421. The screen populated faster than I expected. 17 deletion requests, all post-2023, 8 of them tied directly to override-level credentials, 6 of them referencing user 134km. Kyle. I stared at the terminal as if it might blink first, but it didn't. It just sat there, dumb and damning, holding the receipts. The earliest deletion Kyle requested, 16 months ago. The most recent, 4 weeks back, each one timestamped during off hours, Friday nights, Sunday mornings, and every one labeled with justification codes that didn't match our internal retention policy. And then came the moment that shifted everything. I opened the full execution log for the script that had deleted DS3421 core data. The command string was clean, but one line glared at me like a slap. Disable alerts equals true. That flag wasn't default. It had to be manually toggled. Someone had gone in the day before the deletion script ran and disabled system alerts. Quietly, no notifications, no pings to IT, just silence. No backup alerts, no trace on the project Slack channel. No paper trail for leadership. Just Kyle, alone, in the logs, turning off the alarms. My stomach twisted in a way I hadn't felt since the day I signed the lease on my ex-husband's lie-filled mortgage. Because this wasn't negligence anymore. This wasn't whoops or forgot to check the box. This was deliberate. I scrolled down further and found a test script run 3 days earlier. A dry run deleted nothing, but logged access to the same directory. Same client. Same override flag. I closed my eyes, leaned back, let the reality settle in like sludge in a cold pipe. Kyle didn't accidentally delete those records. He planned it, staged it, tested it. And when he was ready, he pulled the trigger and made damn sure no one would hear the shot. Except now I had the bullet casing. And the fingerprint, and the motive, that was still forming, swirling around like a storm I couldn't quite see, but I didn't need a motive yet. I had evidence. I had timestamps. I had access logs with his name etched into the destruction of a contract, still marked active in 3 systems. This wasn't just grounds for dismissal. It was grounds for investigation. By legal, by the board. Maybe even by state compliance officers, depending on the industry. And I was the only one who knew. My heart thudded against my ribs. The hum of the HVAC sounded louder than usual. I glanced over my shoulder, even though I was alone in the office. No one came in on Fridays anymore unless they had something to prove or something to hide. I checked the access log again. The system had automatically recorded my session, which meant Kyle or anyone else with admin clearance could see I'd been digging. Unless I covered my tracks, so I did. I mirrored the data, exported the log set, anonymized my footprint, and wiped the login cache. Then I powered down the terminal, unplugged the Ethernet, sat in the dark with my thoughts pounding louder than the server fans in the next room. This wasn't Stratacor's mess anymore. It was Kyle's. And the question wasn't whether I'd act. It was when. I didn't sleep that night, didn't even try. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, spooning peanut butter out of the jar like it was fuel, not food. The hum of my fridge felt louder than my thoughts, till I remembered I'd muted all my Slack notifications the week before to stop hearing Kyle's damn gifs every 10 minutes. I turned them back on, opened the desktop app, and began combing through the graveyard. Not the general channels. Those were full of happy hour invites and Kyle pretending to understand quarterly goals. No, I dug into the private ones. The smaller back channels where people thought the company wasn't watching. First stop, #opsentite, joke channel Kyle created for fast fixes and slow bourbon. Just the name made my teeth itch. I searched keywords, DS3421, audit, Stratacor, nothing direct. Then I tried cleanup, logs, and scripts. Bingo. A message from Kyle, timestamped about a week before the purge. Stratacor logs are a mess. Might run a sweep this weekend just to make it pretty before the suits come sniffing. Followed by a laughing emoji and a response from one of the ops engineers. As long as legal don't ask what pretty means face with tears of joy. There it was. Right there in the open. Not phrased like a confession, phrased like an inside joke. That casual, cocky tone people use when they think rules are flexible and accountability for someone else. The thread had 8 replies. All joking, all vague, but the implication, crystal clear. Clean it up. Make it look good. Hide the rot. Not a single person pushed back. I copied the whole thread, saved screenshots, and dumped it into my encrypted folder. Then I turned to Jira, hoping maybe, just maybe, someone documented this somewhere with an ounce of professionalism. They did. Sort of. Under a tech debt Stratacor epic, I found a closed ticket tagged DS3421 cleanup batch. Description: purge inactive record blocks for storage compliance before audit window. The ticket was marked as completed by, you guessed it, Kyle. Resolved 3 days before the deletion script ran. I clicked into the task comments. One ops tech had written, should we validate against MSA before wipe? Retention clause might still be active. Kyle's reply, legal said it's fine, we're outside the window. Worst case, it's a soft flag, not enforcement. Soft flag. Outside the window? I almost threw my spoon across the kitchen. The clause wasn't vague. It was a legal minefield, screaming in bold that any breach voided indemnity and opened the door to regulatory hell. You don't wave that off with a shrug and a soft flag. And you damn sure don't think you're outside the window, you check. You verify. You call legal and get it in writing. Which made me realize something else. Kyle hadn't asked legal, because I had access to the legal SharePoint, and there was no such communication. No approval, no waiver, nothing, he lied. And the ops team rolled with it. Why? Because they didn't care? Because Kyle made it sound like routine maintenance? Or because someone higher up told them to do it? That thought hit me like ice water. I opened my email archive, searched for mentions of DS3421 from exec-level accounts. Nothing recent. One auto-forwarded calendar invite from 6 months ago caught my eye. A data minimization strategy session hosted by the VP of Product and attended by Kyle. I clicked in. Attached was a PDF, storage optimization pre-audit notes. Page 2 listed legacy client log downsizing as a priority. Legacy client, singular, no name. But I didn't need one. They knew. At least someone did. Maybe not the full extent, maybe not the clause itself, but they knew there was risk, and they sent Kyle in like a pressure washer to clean it without asking questions. It wasn't just Kyle playing cowboy. It was structural. It was systemic. And they gave me the mop when the floor was already soaked in gasoline. I stared at my screen, breathing through my teeth. This wasn't some accidental slip-up. This wasn't a rogue script. This was a chain of quiet nods, of look-the-other-way decisions. Executive whispers passed through closed doors and digital broom closets. And now I had a front-row seat. They wanted me to drown in Stratacor's backlog, wanted me to get buried under its bad code and broken workflows so I wouldn't notice the corpse they stuffed under the rug. But I saw it. And I had the keys to the vault now. So I shut my laptop, poured a fresh cup of black coffee, and pulled out my notebook. It was time to make a list. There's a certain stillness that comes right after betrayal sinks its teeth all the way in. Like your brain, after getting tossed around in a storm of confusion, just clicks. I'd spent the weekend turning over every receipt, every Slack message, every log line like puzzle pieces with dried blood on them. Now I wasn't flinching anymore. I wasn't reeling. I was reorganizing. Monday morning, 5:42 a.m. Office still empty, streetlights still blinking outside like tired eyelids. I slid into my desk without turning on the overhead lights. Just the warm glow of the monitor and the rhythmic click of my keyboard. I didn't touch Stratacor, not directly. That would have triggered admin logs. Instead, I worked from a cloned environment I'd built in my own sandbox folder deep within the shared drive. Encrypted. Ghosted. The first thing I did was re-archive the DS3421 MSA. It's time downloading the full document set attached to it. The original proposal, the compliance addenda, 3 amendment drafts that were never executed, and a 2015 email from legal reiterating the 15-year retention clause in writing. I flagged that one twice. It wasn't just legal language. It was confirmation that leadership had reviewed the clause at least once in the past decade. No one could claim ignorance now. Next, I downloaded the deletion logs from the legacy admin panel, complete with IP traces and execution paths. The metadata showed exactly which override account triggered each deletion and when. And while the names were masked, the pattern was unmistakable. Kyle's login times aligned with every one of them. I didn't need an admission, I had timestamps. And timestamps don't lie. I saved all of it, every file, every screenshot, every snippet of Slack banter, to a compressed archive. Then I uploaded that archive to a cloud drive under a throwaway Proton Mail account I'd created the night before, with the most bland, corporate safe name I could think of, Records Review Digest 2024. I emailed myself the link, then deleted all traces of the transfer from my work browser history. Then I did the one thing I hadn't done yet. I printed it, not everything, just a single page, Clause 14.3b from the MSA, in bold, with a post-it that said Audit Risk. I slipped it into a manila folder labeled Vendor Compliance DS Clients and tucked it inside the filing cabinet at my desk, not for anyone else to find, just to know it existed somewhere physically out in the world. Because if this burned down, I wasn't going to rely on backups. I'd learned that lesson the hard way once before. Different context, same betrayal. By 7:03 a.m., the first early birds started trickling in. Kyle waltzed past my desk, smelling like his overpriced oat milk cologne, holding a smoothie, AirPods in, nodding like a man who still thought he owned the room. I nodded back, just once. Not too much, not too little, just enough to be forgettable. At 8 o'clock sharp, an all-staff email landed in our inboxes. Subject, Final Reminders Quarterly Board Audit begins this Thursday. There it was. The clock. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the subject line, reading it over and over. Thursday. That gave me 3 days. 3 days to decide what kind of move this would be. I wasn't going to HR. I wasn't going to legal. Not yet. because none of them were safe. Not when the VP of product had been in the room for that data minimization strategy. Not when ops joked openly about cleaning house. Not when Kyle had danced through the system like he was scrubbing away footprints, not data. No. If I wanted this to matter, I had to go outside the chain. And I knew exactly who to talk to. The board was bringing in a third-party auditing firm to verify compliance, someone who didn't answer to internal politics, someone whose job was to find cracks and shine a light. All I needed to do was give them a flashlight. But not now. Timing mattered. Strike too early and it becomes a debate. Strike too late and it's damage control. I needed the sweet spot. The moment when eyes were on the room and hands were hovering over approve buttons, so I waited. And while I waited, I documented everything, not in Word, in handwritten notes. Old school. Spiral bound, margin scribbled, time-stamped, because paper can't be hacked. By Tuesday afternoon, I had a complete timeline. Kyle's access history, the MSA, the deletions, the Slack thread, the false JIRA justification, the calendar invite, all mapped out in black ink like a battle plan. This wasn't improvisation anymore. This was orchestration. They wanted to treat me like a janitor for their mess. Fine. Let's see how clean they look under fluorescent lights and federal scrutiny. Wednesday night, 11:27 p.m. My apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind where the hum of the refrigerator feels like a ticking bomb and even the creak of your chair sounds guilty. I hadn't turned the lights on, just let the glow of my laptop screen cast its judgment across the cluttered table. The only thing louder than the silence was the pulse in my neck, thudding slow and steady like a countdown clock. My browser was open to the contact form for Feldman and Shaw, third-party audit firm hired by the board for tomorrow's review. I'd looked up the assigned lead earlier, Elliot Shaw, senior partner. A no-nonsense type, known for showing up in press releases when companies self-reported just before state compliance agencies came knocking. I'd crafted the message earlier in a text doc. Cold, clean, surgical. Subject, Clause 14.3b, MSA retention risk. Client ID, DS3421. Attached is documentation regarding a currently active master service agreement between Brightspan Solutions and client DS3421. Please refer specifically to Clause 14.3b concerning data retention requirements. You will also find a secondary folder containing logs of data deletions, system activity, internal correspondence relevant to the status of this client's compliance risk profile. The contract remains unexpired. No further explanation needed. The documents speak for themselves. No name, no signature. I'd stripped away anything personal, because this wasn't personal anymore. This was structural rot, stitched into the guts of a company that smiled for investor decks while wiping down the crime scene with a PowerPoint clicker. I wasn't going to be its fall girl. Not tomorrow. Not ever. I clicked attach and navigated to the ZIP archive. Records Digest DS3421, final zip encrypted, timestamped, verified. The file alone was 48 megabytes of compressed implications, raw logs, Slack exports, screenshots, MSA excerpts, the most damning line of all. A deletion script's execution record stamped 2 weeks before the clause's deadline. I pasted the Proton Drive link into the body of the email. Double-checked it, triple-checked it. Then, without really thinking about it, I highlighted the clause again in bold. Clause 14.3b. The service provider shall retain and make accessible all client data for a minimum of 15 years from the date of contract initiation. It was the clause no one remembered, the one that could nuke indemnity coverage, the one that tomorrow would detonate quietly between 2 sips of catered coffee in a polished boardroom full of suits who never knew I existed. I leaned back, cracking my knuckles one by one, staring at the screen like it might blink first. For a long second, I didn't move. My hand hovered over the mouse, index finger ready, but not yet willing. Not because I was scared, because I wanted to feel it. This was the line, the moment when everything would shift. After this, I wouldn't be able to walk it back or pretend I didn't know what I knew. My cursor hovered over send, a single breath, cold, steady, no shaking. And then click. The boardroom smelled like fresh coffee and expensive nerves. Mahogany table polished to a shine, 12 chairs filled with suits trying to look relaxed. And at the head, Greg Talbert, our CEO, smiling like he still believed this audit was just a formality. I stood outside the glass wall, half hidden behind a frosted panel, holding a manila folder, I didn't need, and watching it all unfold like a one-woman audience to a play nobody knew they were in. Elliot Shaw, senior partner at Feldman and Shaw, sat calmly at the far end. No blazer, just a white shirt rolled at the cuffs, and a face carved out of procedural muscle memory. He didn't speak at first, just clicked through something on his tablet, occasionally glancing at a thick printout that looked heavier than it should have. Then he cleared his throat. I'd like to begin by reading Clause 14.3b from an active master service agreement between Brightspend Solutions and client DS3421, he said. The room stilled. A few heads turned. Talbert frowned. Kyle tilted his head like a dog hearing a whistle. Elliot continued. The service provider shall retain and make accessible all client data for a minimum of 15 years from the date of contract initiation. Unauthorized deletion or failure to demonstrate continuous data availability shall constitute breach of indemnity and grounds for regulatory referral. He paused. No reaction yet. Then he placed the printout gently on the table, tapped his screen once, and said flatly, based on the attached system logs and metadata, this clause was breached last quarter. As a result, Brightspend's indemnity coverage has been invalid since July. You could feel it. The stillness, heavy as a dropped anchor. Talbert's hand jerked toward his coffee cup. He missed. It tipped, sloshing brown liquid across his investor packet. He muttered something sharp under his breath as he scrambled for a napkin, trying to blot out damage control with a single ply. Kyle looked like someone had pulled the oxygen from the room. His lips parted. No sound. Elliot didn't look at either of them. He just kept scrolling, methodical. From across the room, General Counsel leaned forward, voice quiet but knife-edged. Mr. Shaw, may I ask who sent you this? That was the moment. My pulse didn't change. My face didn't move. I just stood there, still as stone, staring through the glass like it was one way. I saw 3 pairs of eyes start scanning the room like they expected someone to stand up and say, it was me. No one did. Elliot Shaw looked up, unfazed. We were sent an anonymous file package late last night via encrypted link. No name, just the relevant clause highlighted and full log access provided. Talbert finally looked up, lips pressed so tight they turned colorless. His coffee-soaked packet lay forgotten. Kyle opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I mean, if that was internal documentation, there must have been context, he said, voice wobbling. Elliot glanced at him once, then turned back to the board. Context is irrelevant if the clause is active and breached, which I assure you it is. You can attempt to dispute the interpretation, though I wouldn't advise it. It will likely escalate. I watched Kyle deflate, actually deflate. Shoulders sank. Adam's apple bobbed. General Counsel's pen froze mid-note. I could feel it, all of it, the stench of panic starting to leach into the room. The subtle shift in posture from control to exposure. It was delicious, and I never flinched, never smirked, never blinked. Because if I gave even one tell, I'd become the story. But from behind the glass, I was a rumor, a maybe, a ghost in kitten heels and a cardigan, and ghosts don't get called into disciplinary meetings. They just haunt. So I turned slowly, folder in hand, walked down the hallway without a word. Past HR, past Kyle's empty desk, past the framed company values hanging crooked on the drywall. I could still hear Elliot's voice trailing behind me, calm and factual as a scalpel. Failure to disclose this during initial audit prep constitutes material misrepresentation. I'll be reporting that as well. They would scramble now. Point fingers. Set up emergency calls. Someone would be placed on administrative leave by noon. Maybe 2 someones. And somewhere, someone would whisper, it has to be Laura. But no one would say it out loud, because no one ever suspects the janitor until the floor disappears from under them. The email landed in my inbox the next morning at 9:12 sharp. Subject, HR meeting 9:30 a.m. Executive Conference 3B. No context. No CCs. No subject lines like follow-up or clarification. Just a quiet summons. The kind that usually ends in a box full of desk plants and a half-hearted exit interview with someone named Cheryl who pronounces compliance like it rhymes with appliance. But I didn't panic. I didn't flinch. I sipped my coffee, put on the same blazer I'd worn the day the DS3421 logs tried to bury me alive, walked down the hallway with a calm that made 3 people look away when I passed. The room wasn't what I expected. No clipboard, no security escort, just Carol from HR looking like someone had finally told her what her job actually entailed, and a representative from the board, Melissa Sutter, gray blazer, red lipstick, tablet in front of her like a judge waiting on sentencing. Carol tried to smile. "Laura, thanks for coming." Melissa didn't look up, just tapped her tablet and said, "You accessed legacy data environments that aren't in active use. You uncovered a contractual clause that hadn't been reviewed since 2018. You escalated it quietly but effectively." I said nothing. She continued, "We're not here to ask why. We already know why. We're here to ask how. The board would like to understand how this was missed and what else might be hiding in our vendor archives." I blinked slowly. "Want a tour of the graveyard?" Melissa smiled for the first time. "We want the person who read the contracts. They didn't ask if I sent the file. They didn't accuse. They didn't threaten. Because at this point, it didn't matter. The board had what it needed." Kyle was placed on administrative leave that morning. The email went out at 11:04 a.m., no fanfare, no explanation, just leave of absence, effective immediately. By lunch, his Slack icon was gray. By 3:15 p.m., Talbert's resignation hit the all-staff feed. After years of dedicated leadership, Greg Talbert has decided to step down to pursue new opportunities. Translation: he got caught holding the grenade and finally heard it ticking. And me, I got an offer. A new title, Records Compliance Officer, reporting directly to legal. Full team, autonomy, salary bump, fancy new office. I listened, I nodded. Then I declined, they blinked. Lisa even tilted her head like I'd spoken in Latin. "You don't want to stay?" she asked. I shook my head. "I already did my part. You can sort out the rest." I stood up, smoothed my blazer, and walked to the door. No anger, no mic drop, no dramatic farewell. Just the quiet understanding that some wins are meant to be clean, not loud. On my way out, I passed the conference room where the audit had gone down. The glass door was ajar. Inside, I heard someone whisper she was the only one who read the contract. I didn't stop, didn't smile, didn't correct them. Because that's the thing about reading the fine print. Once you do, you see the whole company for what it is. Not the mission statement, not the quarterly projections, the bones. And Brightspan's bones were full of rot. I got back to my desk, sat down one last time, and opened my laptop. No Slack pings, no inbox backlog, just one final act. I ejected the flash drive, wiped the folders, deleted the sandbox. Then I closed the lid. No hesitation, no second glance, just steady hands and silence. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.